Thank you.
Okay, so yes, I'm Paul, another Paul, Professor of Urban Intelligence at Breda University. And my expertise is actually on the interaction between land use and transportation, where also cycling and building a multimodal culture is actually one of the, it's one of my expertise areas. So the interaction between land use, transportation, and attitudes. So one of the big questions when we try to implement new mobility solutions is if we build new infrastructure, if we build new facilities, will people use it? And the famous term "build it and they will come" is, related to that. And it's actually also a question: will they actually come if we build these facilities? So what we basically try to do in the Netherlands and also in the US, but in a different way, is to create a multimodal city. I've even seen very, car dependent and car oriented cities moving towards more multimodal solutions in the last decade. So what we try to do basically is to create like compact cities with an emphasis on using public transport and biking and walking, and some balanced car accessibility. So we all know that the car, it brought many advantages when it comes to accessibility and freedom, but the downside is also very clear. And as Derek and also Chris already showed during the introduction, in the Netherlands, we went, in the 60s, we also went all the way with facilitating our cities for cars. And then slowly but gradually, we moved backwards, and we re-implemented cycling infrastructure and chose for a more balanced accessibility for the car. And with that, we have been able to dramatically increase also the quality of the public rail. What I will show today, and I only have 7 minutes, so in 7 minutes, approximately, I will try to summarize 7 years of PhD work and a lot of student work that is related to the minor urban retrofitting. That was also where Paul was referring to. We are doing a minor urban retrofitting each year, and we are doing that for host cities in Northern America. And with that, we bring, it's a real Kickstarter to get inspiration for new ideas. So for instance, the green loop that was developed or is being implemented in Portland. Our students have been developing these ideas also for Northern America and for other cities during the last decades, and this might also be an interesting opportunity for you. So build it and they will come. Yes, of course, we always and very often see these examples, and this is one of the busiest cycling facilities in the Netherlands. It's in Utrecht. And what you often see is that we compare the situations between the Netherlands and Northern America, and then look at, okay, so we see much more cycling facilities here, we see many people using it. So if we implement these facilities in Northern America, then will it work? Well, that is of course the question. And one of the challenges that many cities also face in Northern America. But there have been quite successful approaches there, and Portland is also one of the examples. Why integration with land use is so important is because it's not only the infrastructure, the cycling infrastructure, that make people cycle in the Netherlands. First of all, it has always been a bit of part of compact land use. If you look at the amount of facilities and destinations that people can reach, Netherlands is one of the top countries in the world. So we have a very compact city, which really is, really facilitates cycling and makes it easier to use the bicycle to a lot of destinations. What we also do is, for instance, because we're such a cycling nation, I think most of the planners, mobility planners, and also urban planners are familiar with the transit-oriented development concept, where you try to concentrate urban developments within the catchment area of railway stations. They always use walking as a reference. what we do in the Netherlands nowadays is we take biking as a reference, and we call that bicycle-oriented development. And what we use is, in this case, GPS data to show real empirical accessibility of the, in this case, a railway station of Den Bosch. This is a picture of the Hague, so you can visualize this on all levels. So can you build a different culture? Our experience in the Netherlands is definitely yes, but it takes time. It takes a strategy, and it takes a long time to make these changes. You see here a comparison that is also made in the introductory presentation today. The cars in Amsterdam in the 70s and the much more multimodal city that Amsterdam has become nowadays. But still, and that's something that is not often highlighted, also many people in the Netherlands are actually quite oriented on the car. So many people also organize their lives around the car. And this is also a picture that we can see in the picture below, is that some neighborhoods are really jam-packed with cars. So to summarize the whole PhD research of 7 years, this is the picture to do that. Can you change attitudes by building a different city and by implementing new mobility features? The answer is actually yes, and that's the second option. You know, you can build facilities when people are willing to do it. That's the top picture. So you have people that already have a multimodal attitude, and you create a city that facilitates this, and then you get that multimodal culture. And what I've shown in my PhD is that actually if you manipulate the built environment, so if you create more facilities for walking, cycling, etc., it really helps to build different attitudes and to change behavior. Thing is that mechanism in itself is not strong enough to really make a big shift. So you need additional measures to make that shift. And that's actually what we do. And this is the last part of the presentation that Paul was also referring to. That's the urban retrofitting minor, where we have students from the Netherlands, but also from around the world, because we have international education now, where they work on urban retrofitting. So that means creating actually that multimodal city with an attractive public realm and attractive places. And that's not only mobility students, but it's also urban designers and urban planners that participate in that effort. So it's really that integral nature that actually also characterizes the Dutch approach towards mobility that is apparent in this minor. And we also call it silo smashing, because you really try to get rid of the silos between these expertises and really make them work together, which is a challenge in itself. One of the things why we do this, and this is also what I show to students, if you look at the policies in Northern America, I think they are much better than ours. They really have good papers, good policies, good ideas. But if you look at the implementation, there's still a lot to do. So there's a lot of implementation gaps. This is just one example where you see that actually the plans are to develop a great multimodal TOD, and that works in itself on the location. But when you look around it, the network around it is not aligned with it. So that means that in the end, people are not able to really visit the destinations that they want to do when they arrive at the TOD. So what the students do is really look from a network perspective and also move through different layers of aggregation to build their plans. This is an example from Calgary, where they made a plan for a neighborhood to completely retrofit it, actually. This is another plan that is actually in the downtown area of Calgary, where they created the super block network. So there is a traditional grid system in this downtown area, and they removed some connections, taking the current traffic into account, and building actually more public space within that downtown area, and more multimodal facilities, such as a mobility hub, etc. Last but not least, they also translate this up until the design level. So really to street level with dimensions for cycling infrastructure, cycling lanes, you name it, to really make it specific, because that's the main challenge that they have to do. And in addition, I just mentioned, based on my PhD, that actually just building these facilities is not enough, but you really have to encourage people to, start behaving differently and start cycling and building new attitudes. And that's where they use tactical urbanism, branding, behavioral campaigns, etc. And they all try to make approaches for that to combine all these different HSO measures into one plan to, the future of the city that we are working in. So for instance, in 2030, 2040. So that's what I would wanted to share with you today. If you are interested as a region to participate, please contact me. We will start with the new rounds of plans in September, and we are open for new cities. So thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Paul. I've put also his email in the chat, so grab it, ask for information. I think it's a great way to bring agencies together, right? That's what we're seeing in San Francisco, where we have multiple agencies brought together in 2000, right, under SFMTA, and that gives us opportunities to have the public transit people directly talk to what we now call streets, right? How do you lay out all those streets? And that's how you can really across those kinds of divisions, right? You can start optimizing. But I know in a lot of situations, yeah, it's different agencies with all their own budgets, right? With all their own goals. So how do you bring those together? And I think what stands out really, what Paul just told us, right, is you invite people in, kind of like it's not a big thing that you're doing, right? But it can be a very powerful thing to bring the different dimensions and the disciplines and the different agencies together in kind of like a very fun way, and rethink and bring all that experience, all those learnings from Europe. Yeah, so that's I think really a really cool way of doing that. Thank you for that presentation, Paul. All right, let's go listen to Derek. Yeah, we'll call him the young wise American. Yeah. And you're going to tell us a little bit more about what you started to explain in the general session.
Yes. Can you hear me all right, Paul?
Yeah, we can hear you, and you're not in full screen yet.
No. Okay. There we go. So yes, I will provide us some brief relief from the attack of the Pauls. That is this workshop. So what I'm going to do quickly through this breakout session is get a little into the data weeds, but I think walk through sort of a scenario and way of thinking of building upon this regional approach and how you can sort of localize your strategies from that perspective. So right now, what we are looking at here in this graph is an output from one of our modeling tools that we use at our company. It's called the Move Meter. And what it does in simple terms is it basically takes the outputs of traditional forecast models. So this is actually using the output of the Puget Sound Regional Council's regional model for their car network. And what we're able to do with the Move Meter and what we're looking at right now is actually the concentration of the number of short trips that take place on the car network. And by short trips, these are trips that are start to finish under 3 miles. So where you see these more thick areas of these green corridors, you can assume, well, the model is telling you that there is a huge concentration of trips that are start to finish under 3 miles on those areas. And what we do and how we use this tool sort of in our work is then thinking about, okay, if people are driving that short of distance, there's clearly some potential and room to switch those short auto trips to non-auto modes of transit. And then, of course, if you then overlay this idea of our mobility hub, which I showed in the general presentation, showing that the largest hub there, the sort of international station of the Puget Sound, is King Station. Sorry, I should say King Station here. Around King Station, and you can see that there's a lot of short trips concentrated around that station. So if we zoom in even closer to the station here, you can see that there's a few corridors up here, as well as along here, that do have these concentrations of short trips. And that can start getting us thinking about how we might want to activate this hub. There's a lot of talk, at least I know of specifically in the Bay Area, about designing, these multimodal hubs that they see in the Netherlands or other European countries. But often, though, I see, at least if you can look at the Salesforce Transit Center in downtown San Francisco, they've put a couple $2 billion into a very beautiful station without much thinking about the multimodal access to the actual station. So in looking specifically around King Station, I just went on Google Images and took some screenshots of the surrounding streets of that station. And you can also see here, it doesn't necessarily look like a multimodal hub, at least from an accessibility standpoint. Clearly, the streets surrounding are much more favored towards a car, and this can be seen as one of those things that might be inhibiting this more regional transit system from fully operating. So how can we start thinking about how to activate King Street Station? Well, the first thing to do is start thinking about not only a regional hierarchy on the regional network, but also a local hierarchy of streets. And in doing that, you're actually designating streets for bikes, public transit, and cars, using innovative designs and policies that incentivize those types of modes for each types of street. So you're looking at your grid network or your city network, and instead of having sort of all modes on one street, which usually incentivizes cars to kind of take over, you think more about how you can have this sort of street hierarchy within your system. So the last thing that I'll close with is just another aspect of what we can quickly do with the Move Meter, which is running this what if scenario and seeing some of the results of that. So what I've done here is all of these areas shown in black, I've done a little selection on them. And with the Move Meter, as you can see here, I can actually tell the Move Meter that because in this hypothetical world, we've created great access to the downtown King Station, that all of these short trips in this region are now going to be cut. You can see the shortest trip, 0 to 3 kilometers, will be 50%, and 3 to 7 kilometers will be 30%. So, these huge trips, this is a Dutch tool, so that's why these are in here, but you got to start somewhere in the US, so we keep them smaller. And what you can see from just doing those changes on that small area, which is always an interesting sort of from a policy standpoint, is how much, of course, you clear up the car network for those who actually need to be driving. Because that's one element of the integrated mobility strategy, is that you do, of course, are going to require cars for some trips, and you want to make those trips easier for some people as well. So you can see the benefits to your car network here. And then looking at the overall kind of impact, you have 5,000 less cars in the AM peak and 10,000 less miles driven per day in that AM peak just by making those changes. So that's a bit of the end of that kind of walkthrough. And then as I pass it off to the other Paul here, I think we can kind of start thinking about how to sort of actualize these what if scenarios, and using such thing as speed limits and other low cost solutions to redirect cars throughout the city. So I'll pass that back to you, Paul.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek. Yeah, it's great to see the the analysis and then the ability to predict. Yeah, where can you have an impact and focus in on regions to again bring that multimodal thing back together. Very cool. Thank you, Derek. Let's go to I promised the last poll. Although I saw another poll as one of our guests today, but let's go to the last poll for as the speakers. Paul van Koningsbrugge. He is going to talk about how do you tackle this and how do you implement it? How do you use software to actually deliver those improvements to the experience and the safety of the people in the streets, right? And in our public transit vehicles, right? I see some questions. I see Radcliffe posted a question. Paul, let's keep it to about 10 minutes. So we have 12 minutes left. They're going to kick us out when the counter is at 0. We can't keep going in this session. Yeah, but we'll go from there. Anybody else? Any questions? Just go ahead and start putting them into the chat, and I'm going to hand it over to the last Paul.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks. I have no idea whether I'm invisible, yes or no, but
yes,
I think my screen is over there. You can see my slide. Yeah, so let's dive into it at once. So far the presentations, I think they were pretty good presentations, had more focus on urban planning. There was one thing that already started to do more technical urbanism. And I would like to take you much more to the operation side. So we cover the full stretch. And the operation side is where you accept, okay, this is how urban planning is. Can be better, can be enhanced, of course, but this is how it is. Now, how can we use this in a much more dynamic way over time and over the day? When we look at the city as it is, what we can see that most of the cities are characterized by multiple claims on that same scarce urban space. We all know it. We want to cycle over there. We want to walk over there. We have construction works over there. We'd like to park our cars, public transport, all in that same scarce space. So what we think is necessary to make a dynamic use of space and time, that we need multi-level, multimodal traffic management. There is traffic because people move all over the world, all over the day. Let's manage them. And therefore we, for a significant part, have developed, and for the last part, we are developing what we are funnel. A traffic management funnel that is, on the one hand, it's just the intersection with intersection control, traffic control, very, very on the spot, on top of what happens over there. There is a cyclist, we need to give him green, yes or no. On the other hand, it's much more overthinking how should we use the city at this very moment. This has a more increasing delay in reaction, but this is a more fundamental approach. And I would like to guide you a little bit along this funnel, and starting at the left side, the side with is very local, with a longer reaction time because you have to do something, plan something that takes time, and what we call dynamic urban space. Now, Copenhagen is not a city in the Netherlands, alas, perhaps, but it is a highly interesting city, and there we try to bring some technical urbanism to the operational level together with city anthropologists, with city architects, with industrial designers, with a cool team, and started to think, okay, there are parking places. Can we make a reservation for the local residents, the one who undertake the entrepreneurs in the city, with the cafes and bars, restaurants? Can we give them the possibility to make a reservation for the place? So the moment a car leaves, you can take it and say, okay, not possible to park here anymore. Put some wooden fences so it becomes something humans do with the street. Put in some additional chairs, and this is now a street where your kids can play, or where you can have an extension of your cafes. Did some analog testings over there, was a huge success. Now, how can we make it even more dynamic? And the same for cyclists. The moment there are so many cyclists, and there are moments on time, especially in cities like Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Utrecht, that there are lots of cyclists, can we give them on a more dynamic way at that moment of the day more space. Later on, we can take it away and give it back to other residents or to the car drivers. So this is one side we are touching upon. The other side is how can we get the best use of the road network as it is. It can always be better, but we have a wonderful road network. How can we use it to the best? And that is how can we distribute traffic over the citywide road network, and where can we place the traffic jams if we have them. Please put them on a place where they don't harm the environment or the quality of life so much. This is network-wide traffic management, and that's also mostly a collaboration between municipalities, the highways agencies. We also started a collaboration with the service providers, TomTom, BMW, come to that we get a kind of interactive route navigation, but it is a very highly interesting approach. One level deeper, but in the midst of the funnel, we can say, okay, now we know there are moments in time there is too much traffic. Perhaps you have to accept that. Can we bring in gates? So, okay, there we put the gates, and we try to reduce the number of vehicles, sometimes even cyclists. There are places where there are by far too many cyclists at certain moments of the day. And distribute the traffic a little bit around it so it doesn't harm people, but you know the density within this sub area is to a level that traffic can flow. And we can do the same, and we have done the same at this moment. We have it operational in, for instance, the city of Utrecht and Rotterdam, around a tunnel or around a street where the 1960s structure has been rebuilt into a very nice, beautiful city boulevard with strongly reduced capacity for vehicles. So bring in the gates, distribute traffic around it, play with the influx, the outflux, and keep traffic flowing on a different quality level. And then in the end, you can bring it all back to intersections. You can even coordinate intersections. You can make it highly multimodal, because this is the place where you really have to come to the decision, how much green do I give to the various modalities, to the active transport modes and to cars. And here, what sincerely helps is some firm political decisions. And they don't need to be crafted in stone. They can change over time, but clearness, I think that's important. That between the level of policy ambitions and the ones who tune the traffic signal controllers, you can just fill that gap. And this is the example of the city of Copenhagen, where they on a political level clearly said, okay, this is the part where we would like give priority to the cars, and especially the heavy traffic. And those are the corridors where we would like to give priority to cyclists, buses, pedestrians for crossability. This is how we tuned the traffic signal controllers. And what we saw in the experiments we did with TomTom in their laboratory with virtual travelers using real-time traffic data, that car drivers seriously started to follow or were guided along the car prioritized road network. So you can create space for cyclists, for public transport in this matter. And you can even make it more dynamic. That is a step we are making at this very moment to make it less hard and more dynamic. I think this is one of our example in the US, San Francisco. They closed off one street, Market Street, make it a beautiful street for people to walk, to cycle, to take public transport. And this is how you can play around with your urban planning. This is not that you all should do it like this, but this is a wonderful example. And in this example, you can say, okay, there are still cars, so should you do it 24/7, or should you say, now there are moments of the day that we closed off for cars? What will we do with the other cars? So how can we redirect them, and can we bring in the gates to prevent that the densities become too high? It is this kind of playing with traffic on all modalities, because bear in mind, cities like Utrecht, Amsterdam, Copenhagen sometimes seriously have traffic jams of cyclists. Playing around with this brings us this dynamics in your thinking. Now, the most effective way to do it is, of course, just to do it. And we've done something in the Netherlands, and that's wonderful. We've done some in Denmark, but how does it work in there's a different environment of San Francisco, with a different attitude perhaps towards car driving, given the size of the country, the size of the area, which is completely different than the Netherlands. We have a San Francisco use case, and we are quite lucky to be able to participate over there. That's the 3rd street. That's a highly interesting street. It has lots of vehicles. It has lots of challenges. It has a light wheel vehicle where the quality, the performance doesn't meet the expectations. And of course, there is the Vision Zero. So we have to protect pedestrians, have to protect cyclists better than they are protected at this very moment. How can we bring us in this thinking over there? And we are running a proof of concept. With well, for us some very interesting colleagues over there. For the quality brings in LiDAR, so we have a very good understanding what is moving over an intersection. How do pedestrians move over, cross over intersections? Where are the cars? How do they move? What are the trajectories? We have a good understanding. We will have a good understanding of the light wheel vehicles the moment they start driving, because we know where they are, we know where they're heading for, and we can estimate the time of arrival. And by bringing from TNL side our own flow cube, we can even give a good understanding who is waiting for the LRV, who is waiting, what is the estimated time of onboarding of the vehicle, so what is the estimated time of leaving of the platform of the LRV, and at what time should we give green for the LRV, so it has a smooth passage over the 3rd street, and still is very attractive to the ones who will use it. And we bring it all together with what we call the traffic flow engine. There we get all the information, there we do the reasoning, there we start to tune the traffic signal controllers, which are deforced signal controllers. So all together we form a good consortium, but we bring all the bits and pieces to fill up the complete puzzle and just pick up the challenge. Can we bring this dynamic use of this part of San Francisco over time? I hope it was within 10 minutes. And of course, it are ideas, some are proven concept, but open for any question.
Excellent. Yeah, it is within the 10 minutes. We have about 11 minutes left. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, and I'm very fortunate to be deeply involved with the proof of concept in San Francisco. And it is, a couple of things that happen there is the reuse of the existing infrastructure. Yeah, and you saw it in one of the diagrams, by building an abstraction layer to make those dynamic decisions, right? But the key is, right, how do you go back to the signal controller and actually tell the signal controller you need to go green, right? Because there's a platoon of cars coming and there's 2 times as many cars in that platoon as there are people waiting, right? And that's a decision that we made, right? And what Paul was talking about, the playing, if we go, it should be 3 times as many, right? Then you change the rule, and because it's all in software, yeah, that will all just start to be implemented. The prioritization is very, very dynamic, and that gives us opportunities to do very interesting other things, and it's continuous learning, right? It's like we don't know the situation, so let's go learn. And when you get a lot of data, then you figure out that, on Saturday morning, something happens and you look at it and you go, oh, of course that happens, but you would never think of it if it's not dynamic. And then you need to turn it around into action. Yeah, without action, then who cares? It's a little bit the mantra that we're following there. Yeah, so that's, I see Rob, you asked the question, how to set priorities on traffic controllers where bike and car networks intersect. I think I touched on it. Paul, anything
Yeah, I
else
was all starting typing. I think setting priorities comes from 2 levels. One is the political level. Where do we think, from political ambitions a city has, where are cyclists more important than cars, and the other way around? So that was the Copenhagen example. On this corridor, cyclists get the highest priority. So that is how we can set. And of course, not without hurting the cars too much, but still more green to cyclists, and especially the over the complete corridor, how to tune traffic signal controllers. Focus on the speed of cyclists. The other way around is, of course, that you can make it very dynamic. If there are more cyclists at that very moment than cars, you might say, okay, now we flush the cyclists, but that's much more the traffic engineering perspective and the traffic demand at that very specific moment in time. So the moment you make it dynamic, you can play around with the volumes, but of course, to hook it into the policies, that is the best way forward.
Does that answer your question, Rob? Yeah, perfect. All right, thank you. All right, another question that came in, and anybody else have any questions? Go ahead, type it in, or I can give you the floor. You still have a couple of minutes left. Radcliffe, you asked a question about the funding in the Netherlands. I don't know, maybe Derek, you have insights, or who could help with answering the question? Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe Paul, just because I'm not as familiar with that. Paul, do you have?
Yes, I can elaborate on that. So the question is, is each city responsible for funding cycling infrastructure, and how much support is provided by national or federal government? Actually, when it comes to cycling infrastructure, it's predominantly the local government that leads the way there. I do a lot of work nowadays for the regional government, and over the last 5 years, we have seen an enormous increase in interest from the regional government in investing in cycling infrastructure. And that these mainly are just what we call internationally, actually, the cycle highways between cities, so the regional level. I would rather call them fast cycling routes, because a highway has a bit of a car orientation or connotation in my view. So for these fast cycling routes, these regional routes, there has been a lot of funding from the regional government, from the provinces actually. And there's also now increasing, how do you call it, momentum, that also the national government will participate to finance a part of the cycling investments. But that's more based on the fact that it's much more easy, also in the Netherlands, to get money for big projects compared to small projects. So if you want to invest in car infrastructure, it sounds a bit strange, but it's much easier to get money for a car or public transport, large-scale projects, than for bicycle projects. And now there are efforts to change that methodology and framework to enable also easier access for smaller projects that in itself may not have such a big impact, but all these small measures together will be very important. So to summarize, local government predominantly, regional government increasingly, and national government is also increasingly involved in this scheme.
Great, thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Great. Yeah, I think I don't know if it's the same in the Northeast. What I see in San Francisco, a lot of the innovation is funded through grants, federal grants, right? But then the moment it turns operational, it has to be funded by local money. Right? Is it a little bit the same that what you're seeing?
Oh, your voice is gone, Paul.
Is my voice gone?
Yeah, it's back again.
It's back again. All right. I don't know where
you were silent for a moment.
Right? That's not typical. People would tell you.
No.
Yeah, but the thing is, I was saying in San Francisco we have the federal funding, through grants and such, innovation, and then local does the operational part, right? And that creates a kind of like a hard transition when you do innovation that then leads to, like, you don't want to build this for a year, right? You want to think about 5 to 10 years. How do you start optimizing and so incorporate the innovation in your operations? I think that's one of the things we really have to think about in the US. How do you take care of those kinds of things? But at least I see it in in San Francisco, and I assume a little bit in the Northeast it's the same. Yeah. All right. Another question here from Marvin. Also the rail company for bike parking at stations. You wanna? So is the question about how do you optimize it across both the rail, right, and then?
I was more talking about the funding. It was in the context of the funding.
Yes.
That's why I attended last week's too, and that's what they were talking about. They said the rail company is a big funder of the parking at the stations, since they realized that, hey, if people bike here, they ride the train. So,
right.
And that's a problem we have in America, where the cities don't want to pay for it, the rail companies don't want to or can't pay for it legally, and so yeah.
Yeah. Anything to add, Paul, how we do that in the Netherlands?
Yes, actually, it's often a combination of funds. The amount of funding depends on, but basically depends on the added value for each partner. So when it comes to these, for instance, the biggest bicycle parking facility in the world in Utrecht, that's really not only funded by Utrecht. That would not be possible. So actually, all redevelopment of that station area is part of what we call one of the large-scale key projects that we have in the Netherlands. And that's national government that is implemented to really improve the facilities at the railway stations and also encourage transit-oriented developments. So when it comes to the bike parking, there is often also a lot of national money involved, because this is, a national interest. It's important for the whole country that the railway system works well. And at many stations, 50% of all people that use the train, they come by bike. So you have to invest there, otherwise the whole system will not function. So that's why also the national government and the regional government and the local government are participating here.
Yeah, great, thank you. All right, minute and a half left. Let's see, Derek, there's a question coming in from Dave. He would like to know if the analysis was accepted by of the move meter, by Seattle MPO for planning purposes.
Yeah, I'll try to fit this in before we get beamed up into the bigger meeting. But yeah, so actually the move meter that was built was used just using the open data sort of provided by the Puget Sound Regional Council. So we weren't actually working on any project or anything. We were just really trying to use these Dutch tools in the American context to see, how they might translate and how we might start to think about how we can use them in projects. So yeah, as of now, we're still in the process of kind of seeing how we can best utilize some of our tooling within these US projects. So we're definitely open to things, of course. But as you can imagine, with all of these things, there's some different political and funding issues at the cities that sometimes makes this more difficult than maybe it should be.
All right, we got 5 seconds left. Thank you all for participating. Reach out to us. We're eager to engage. So thank you all. Let's go back to our the main session.